Coming up on Cronkite NewsWatch.
One city is letting it go. The water, that is. We'll give you an update on a key Arizona dam.
And water is a hot topic in the Arizona desert.
God hasn't made any more water. Whatever we got, we've got.
The state's lawmakers are spreading the word.
We continue our coverage of water issues in Arizona and tell you what is being done to regulate water in the state.
Plus, Arizona receives more than 20% of its water from the Colorado River, which it shares with 7 other states.
In-depth, insightful, innovative. Cronkite NewsWatch starts right now.
The difference between Arizona's barren desert and its bustling city is this.
There's been a lot of talk about Arizona's water supply. The belief is that there are too many people and not enough water.
Melt-offs, streams, aquifers, whatever the source, the life's blood of our desert valley relies on Arizona's rights to watersheds.
Arizona has several watersheds. Each color on this map represents runoff water flowing into the valley from other parts of Arizona. As you can see, the direction of the watershed is keyed in by these arrows. Now, Arizona has a geographic alliance with surrounding states for rights to that water. Here in the valley, we get 2/3 of our water from the Salt River Project and the Verde River, as you can see in this highlighted part right here. Cronkite News Washington, D.C. reporter Mackenzie Scott is tracking these issues on Capitol Hill.
It's been over a year since former Senator Jon Kyl was in office, and he still can't let go of water.
Just don't know how much we're going to need in the future and where we're going to get it. I mean, God hasn't made any more water. Whatever we've got, we've got.
Before he left office, Kyl was close to securing a water rights deal with the Navajo and Hopi, but it fell through. Now he is back in the fight with Senator Jeff Flake, who announced he will be traveling to northern Arizona this month to start a year-long conversation on water.
There are some serious challenges if we don't get ahead of the problems, in effect. So in talking to Senator Flake about it, he decided that one way to approach the problem is to have this year-long conversation throughout the state of Arizona.
Flake said that taking over where Kyl left off is intimidating.
He has such a background that I don't have. But I'm a longtime Arizonan. I know the impact of these issues. We've got people already working on these issues that helped in what Senator Kyl was able to do. So we're going to draw on his work and hopefully take it to the next step.
A water shortage could happen as early as 2016, according to experts of the Central Arizona Project, which provides much of Arizona's water, which it draws from the Colorado River.
I think that was a wake-up call when we hear that you're going to have shortages in the CAP system by 2016, 2017. So we need to step up our efforts because it's coming more quickly than we thought.
Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick agrees. She says we've got no time.
Well, Arizona hasn't had a major water infrastructure project since the Central Arizona Project. And that was an effort that was led by our congressmen at the time, working across the aisle to get things done. I'd like to see that happen again in a major way so that we can secure Arizona's water for the next 100 years.
Although Kyl may have knowledge that will help current leaders tackle the issue of water, he knows that it's future lawmakers that will find the solutions.
Young leaders will be the answer to the future problems. I don't know the answers yet, but I know they'll figure it out if we can develop their leadership.
Lately, Arizona's been encouraging water conservation efforts, and that includes rainwater harvesting.
But up in Telluride, Colorado, it's a different story. Cronkite News investigative reporter Alex Lanciel traveled up north to tell us more.
The snow that caps these mountains will melt and run into this river, the San Miguel. It flows into the Dolores and then into the Colorado. Eventually, the snow that falls in Telluride makes its way to Lee's Ferry, where Arizona pulls its share of Colorado River water. That water was the subject of dispute throughout the early 1900s by the 7 states who claimed to have rights. The agreement for the Upper Basin states wasn't reached until 1948, and according to the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact, Arizona gets priority over Colorado residents for the water.
And what that means is even as the rain is falling on their property, that water has an obligation to fulfill downstream.
In other words, Arizona gets first dibs, and those senior water rights have prevented Colorado residents from catching, storing, and using rainwater and snowmelt. In fact, up until statewide legislation passed in 2009, nobody could legally operate a catchment system of any kind.
Even though one individual diversion, one house would be hardly noticeable in the river, the collective effect of all those diversions would be a noticeable effect.
Now the law says Colorado residents can harvest falling rain and snow, but only if you meet the requirements for a permit.
Oh, it's filled up a lot. That's great.
That's Chris Holstrom, a local Telluride farmer that participated in illegal rainwater harvesting before the 2009 laws passed.
I had several articles written back when I was still illegal, and I actually got a call from the Colbert Report when asking if I was still a water bandit, and it was right after I'd gotten my permit, and I had to say, no, I'm legal now.
Chris has a permit for the catchment that you can see behind me, but most Colorado residents don't fall into that category.
Here's why. To have a catchment, you need a rooftop precipitation permit. And to get one of those, you can't receive any water from the city, which means you have to have a well on your property. And to have a well on your property, you have to own over 35 acres of land. Of almost 400,000 residents with active well permits, less than 300 have permits for catchment. Remember, this is because technically, the water Coloradans would be catching belongs to Arizonans. The law says Arizona gets 50,000 acre-feet of water each year from the upper basin. Only after that water is distributed can Colorado and other states take their share. It's up to Colorado to make sure the river is replenished, which is why the permits for rainwater harvesting are so strict.
Basically, a very narrow band of people are able to apply for and get a permit. But it's a step.
A step that was necessary for Chris to continue farming when her well stopped supplying her with a consistent amount of water. Because the well isn't always sufficient, Chris depends on the catchment to provide her with enough water for her plants in the greenhouse. But an average citizen wouldn't be able to make use of the snow that falls onto their roof if their water source were to run dry.
Drought, I think, is going to be a way of life from now on.
The continued negotiations for rights for the Colorado River has made it not only tough for homeowners like Chris, but also for small business owners.
Right. Politicians and homeowners aren't the only ones that are worried about this dwindling resource. Farmers are also worried about how they're going to get their share. Reporter Brittany Thomason went to Goodyear to find out what local farmers are doing to make sure they get their part.
When it comes to Arizona water issues, the agriculture industry has already started to cut back and conserve.
It weighs on my mind because we've got younger people in the family that are getting ready to enter and have been in the business for a while.
So farmer Ron Rayner wonders where his business is headed.
The water declines are happening.
But at his Goodyear ranch, Rayner uses certain techniques that allow him to produce more crops with less water.
We have essentially doubled our production per acre in that same time period since 1980.
Even though some of the crops Rayner grows are particularly water intensive. Because of the salt in the water, you can only grow certain types of agriculture here, which excludes produce. So they grow grains like wheat, barley, and the water-guzzling cotton. But that cotton is special. It's genetically modified. That means a routine amount of water gives Rayner double the cotton.
You don't want to pay for any more that goes on that crop than what it absolutely needed.
Arizona's Department of Water Resources says Rayner isn't the only one conserving.
Majority of farms have implemented a lot of these measures as time has gone on just to save water because it makes economic sense.
And for Rayner, those new measures mean keeping a deep-rooted family business alive. In Goodyear, Brittany Thomason, Cronkite News.
Farmers who participate in water conservation projects qualify for Arizona state tax credit.
Meantime, 2 natives in the southwest part of the state are getting a big boost, and Cronkite News reporter Vivian Padilla traveled to the Colorado River Delta south of Yuma.
It's where the dry spell is coming to an end, all in the name of science.
You're looking at the Morelos Dam on the southern border of Yuma. Enough water in it to fill 52,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Its 3-month release, set to end in May, is doing what Mother Nature hasn't.
It's a large volume of water in a short period of time that's intended to, in a way, mimic a spring flood.
The water release would help reestablish the native plants and animals of the region.
And you have more than 380 species of birds that depend on that area for their nesting areas.
And those nesting areas are also in jeopardy.
There are no young trees, saplings going up to replace the old trees. Allow some of these seeds to germinate and create a whole new generation of native vegetation of cottonwoods and willows.
And this historic water project has been in the making for many years, requiring two nations, Mexico and the U.S., to come together. It's an environmental experiment born from a binational 5-year agreement, allowing all that water to flow through the dam, a first in its 64-year history.
It's of great benefit to both countries, and I think it may represent a new era in how we manage water across the borders.
And it's Aaron Marshall's job to make sure that the right amount of water is released at just the right time.
It's sort of like a science experiment, and we have a lot of uncertainties. Hopefully, this will give us more information if there's going to be a pulse flow again in the future.
One historic step now that may mean a more certain future for the native plants and animals that need water to survive. Reporting in Yuma, Vivian Padilla, Cronkite News.
With conservation, drought, and an ever-rising demand for this precious resource, now the question seems obvious. Will the valley run out of water?
Well, 2/3 of the valley's water is delivered to your front door through canals like this one. It comes from the Salt and Verde rivers and is stored in lakes along the way to ensure there's enough water when we need it. This enormous infrastructure is managed by the Salt River Project.
And Cronkite News went straight to the source, the president of the Salt River Project, to ask him if the valley will run out of water.
And I think it's a knowledge divide. There's people that are very knowledgeable about water, and then there are people that assume that we're in a desert and they hear talk of a drought and assume the worst and don't want to be actually informed on it, and I think act sort of conspicuously irrational as opposed to giving credit for the planning and the stewardship that's gone into marshaling the resource.
For many, water also means recreation, and shortages can have a problematic effect. Cronkite News reporter Megan Thompson went to Colorado, and she found something that's making it harder for recreational businesses to stay afloat.
I was born and raised on the water and around mountains. I love this. I love this place.
And as you look around Telluride, Colorado, it's hard not to. It's a town built on recreation, a place where everyone wants to be outdoors.
It's a good start, sir. I mean, certainly we recommend another 6 or 7 rods.
John Duncan owns Telluride Outside, offering the ultimate in outdoor memory making, rafting, fly fishing, just to name a few. And he says after being in business for more than 20 years, the appeal of outdoor activities hasn't changed. But something has.
What has changed, though, is the amount of water falling from the sky.
Aside from the drought, no let up in the number of people coming here for fun, and farmers using the river for irrigation, and other municipal and industrial uses. The river is taking a beating. Now, it may look like there's plenty of snow that will eventually melt and go into the river, but the locals here say it's simply not enough. It's not only affecting the wildlife, like the trout that recreation companies like Telluride Outside fish for.
Just as a goldfish will grow in size corresponding to the size of its goldfish bowl or its fish tank, which is a pretty well-known fact. So too with trout.
It's also affecting the city's cash flow. Typically, Telluride Outside ends its rafting season on August 1st. But in the past 14 years, in all of them, the company has only held out to that date twice.
And so those communities can't count on the boaters buying gas, buying groceries, using their shuttle services.
Colorado River Conservation Board member April Montgomery says, although there's an obvious problem, there are positive things going on. The board recently designed an improved water flow to help 3 species of fish that swim the waters of the San Miguel, one of the 2 rivers that feed the Colorado. They plan on doing the same for the other. And Duncan says it's all about making sure everyone who wants the experience of the great outdoors gets that shot.
The amount of water that we have has everything to do with our ability to do the things that we love.
So how important is it that we start conserving water now?
Well, there's a company in the valley that believes in starting at the source. Cronkite News reporter Hannah Lawrence shows us how saving water can start with a little bit of magic.
I call kids that like to save water hydro heroes.
Why hydro heroes?
Hydro, well, that means water. And heroes, well, because they rescue it.
Magician Gary Lazok brings magic into schools to teach water conservation.
What magic does is it opens the mind.
And the woman behind the show uses that to her advantage.
The point and the magic happen at the same time so that there's some sort of emotional connection in the brain. And every time they think of water conservation, they think, oh, fun.
Kathy Whalen has been producing her magic shows for 25 years after teaching water conservation became a state requirement in 1980.
Can you write us a show on water conservation? And I'm like, wow, that sounds boring, you know. So I spiced it up with the magic.
Children in the Tempe district were among the first to start learning about conserving this magical resource. Now, 4 Arizona cities have joined Tempe in funding magicians to talk to children about an issue that's becoming more and more urgent.
Wow! All these young kids that we're teaching now are going to grow up and be the residents in the future.
And the kids are in turn teaching their parents.
And the parents would come up to me and say, oh, you're the one who told them I'm not allowed to water the yard in the middle of the day. You're the one who told them I can't take long showers.
It's all part of training the next generation of hydro heroes.
There are other efforts making waves in Arizona. Residents and local businesses are using bathwater to water their plants.
Meanwhile, other residents are changing their landscaping techniques altogether. Cronkite News reporters Lauren Wells and Hannah Lawrence are tracking these 2 new trends.
This half acre of land doesn't run on ordinary water.
Gray water is the typically once used water that we then send down our drains. So that would be not all drains, but the bathroom sink, bathtub, shower, and washing machine.
Brad Lancaster has turned his Tucson yard into a gray water oasis, and now that city is trying to encourage others to follow his lead.
Gray water harvesting saves you money. It can lead to a healthier, more verdant, beautiful landscape. If you've got fruit trees and whatnot, it can lead to more fruit production. And it also reconnects you with where things come from and where things go.
Tucson is the first city in Arizona to encourage residents to rethink reusing what is in scarce supply.
We really need to become much more efficient and creative at how we reuse multiple times, cycle multiple times what we already have.
Not far from Brad, Reed Park Zoo is also using gray water.
It catches all the water from our sinks, and we utilize that as underground to supplement the vegetation that is around the building itself.
The gray water that Reed Park Zoo uses benefits animals like this one because they get greener vegetation.
And as Brad tells me,
You instead use your gray water, well, you can eliminate your current water consumption by 30 to 70% and thus reduce your current water bill by 30 to 70%.
using gray water can also benefit your bottom line.
Jeremy Cahill got his landscaping start in middle school while he maintained his grandmother's 2.5-acre property.
She was a school teacher, and so she loved to teach me about all the native plants.
Now, as people are urged to save water, he's learned how to implement a native type of landscape.
I've seen the xeriscaping just explode.
Cahill says xeriscaping can save about $40 on a monthly water bill per 1,000 square feet of yard transformation. Now, even though xeriscaping your yard will save money and water, replacing all your grass with concrete like this could make it a lot hotter.
And it would increase potentially the heat island effect.
That's why Kathy Reimer, water conservation specialist for the city of Chandler, is pushing for desert greenery instead. Chandler is one of several cities using a yearly budget to reimburse homeowners who xeriscape, with some rebates as high as $3,000.
And that's why our xeriscape program, and I believe most of the other city programs, require that when you take out your grass, you have to put in at least 50% desert-adapted plants.
And Cahill says that even without the city's rebates, the money spent xeriscaping your yard could be made back in 1 to 5 years.
But having that rebate as an added benefit is just like icing on the cake.
Not to mention taking a little of the pain out of loads of yard work. In Chandler, Hannah Lawrence, Cronkite News.
Arizonans make the most of the little rain that we get, but some believe that the future is in making it rain. Reporter Adam Waltz tells us about the next big thing in water production.
We know clouds bring rain. Scientists say they know how to make clouds produce more rain.
It's enhancing the ability for the cloud to produce more precipitation.
What Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud is talking about is cloud seeding. Silver iodide is injected into the cloud by flares, increasing the attraction between water vapor particles.
So you're collecting the water so that it becomes larger. In order to get precipitation to fall out of the cloud, you have to grow the droplets big enough so that they fall under the force of gravity.
Many clouds keep up to 90% of their moisture. Seeding collects the water particles and boosts the cloud's probability to rain.
This does is only increase the ability of what something was about to do.
Seeding for snow in Colorado and Wyoming is already underway. Runoff water would feed into the Colorado River and replenish Arizona's dwindling water supply.
We could gain up to 1.3 million acre-feet a year to the system from a large-scale cloud seeding effort.
1 acre-foot of water is enough to provide 2 families of 4 with enough water for the entire year. And to produce it, well, it's cheap.
An acre-foot of water from seeding can cost as little as $5. The leading alternative, desalination, can run thousands of dollars.
About the weather modification or cloud seeding is that it's absolutely the cheapest way of adding to the water supply that's out there.
Some studies have shown an increase of 5 to 15% in rainfall from seeding, but there are no absolutes.
We don't really know what we're dealing with here.
It's not 100% accurate, obviously, but the science makes sense.
And replenishing Arizona's diminishing reservoirs makes sense too. In Phoenix, Adam Waltz, Cronkite News.
Water usage around one Arizona river basin is affecting you here in Phoenix.
Cronkite News investigative reporter Dom DeFurio takes a deeper look into this issue.
In Arizona's Verde River Basin, wells are draining water from the ground at a rate that experts say just isn't sustainable.
Anybody that's been close to water knows that the problem's been coming for years, decades.
These hydrologists from the Department of Water Resources are taking measurements from a well owned by the city of Phoenix.
243.74.
This year, the Arizona Department's 8 data collectors will measure about 1,700 wells. It's a job that keeps them on the road for much of the year. Over time, they've been able to get a sense of water level trends in the state.
There we go.
But have never had enough money to measure outside of the state's 5 active management areas, or AMAs. These zones were set up by the state. The department's chief hydrologist oversees the workers who monitor these wells.
We certainly don't do as many water level measurements statewide as we used to.
The city of Clarkdale sits above a major source of underground water and right beside the Verde River, but it isn't included in any of the AMAs. I found only 37 wells registered in the city of Clarkdale. Just one of those is checked regularly by the state, and it's not this one.
In a private well, nobody ever checks it.
Doug Von Gossig is the mayor of Clarkdale and the chairman of an institute that monitors the river. He measures his well, and it gives him a better idea of how much water he's using. Von Gossig tells me that 37 wells is an understatement, and hundreds of others are overlooked.
I would say it's closer to 500.
Even in 2005, Clarkdale wells drained enough water to supply 21,000 families for a year.
As you intercept that water from the aquifers and use it for human purposes, it's water that doesn't make it to the river eventually.
The Verde River Basin is the size of Rhode Island and is important to Phoenix because it supplied almost 40% of the Salt River's water last year. Water from all over the state will flow through the rivers into these canals, such as the one you see beside me, and it'll eventually end up in your home. Former Arizona Senator Tom O'Halloran sponsored 9 water bills while in office and says not enough is being done to conserve water in river basins like the Verde.
I just, for the life of me, can't imagine that we as Arizona citizens want to lose that.
Those are all very, very difficult political issues and very difficult economic issues that have to be solved.
For the investigative team, I'm Dom DeFurio.
Finally tonight, a woman who claims she can help solve Arizona's water crisis. She says she can find water using special tools. Reporter Clarissa Tapia takes us to meet the woman who calls herself a water dowser.
Here in Arizona, we see a lot of this. But once in a while, we catch a glimpse of water. But Marge Hefty isn't satisfied with glimpses. She seeks out water in a very unique way.
Can you tell me which way the water is flowing?
Marge is a water dowser, a person who uses special rods to indicate when water is flowing underground.
When you look for water, you envision water. As I was approaching the vein, I knew it was coming.
Using what she calls L-rods and a pendulum, Marge is able to find water in all kinds of places, even though the art of her water searching hasn't quite caught on in scientific circles.
It's not anything that you can give up your day job
For the past 10 years, the U.S. has been in a moderate to severe drought. In Arizona, this deep orange indicates severe drought, and it covers 36% of the state. According to the U.S. Drought Monitor, that number more than doubled from 3 months ago, and experts fear that this drought could last up to 3 decades.
It's going to be more crucial.
That's why Marge has dedicated more than 50 years to dowsing.
I got into dowsing mainly because my husband was, and I thought we should do things together.
And they did until his passing about 10 years ago.
I still call on him to do things. We were a team.
In search of life-giving water and a unique Arizona livelihood.
Yeah, because if nothing else, it keeps me young.
In Tucson, Clarissa Tapia, Cronkite News.
And that's all the time we have for this Cronkite NewsWatch special.
For more in-depth coverage, just head over to CronkiteNewsOnline.com.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.